When I woke up the next morning, I was surprised to find that things had drastically changed. Votes had been deleted. So there were many instances of people with the same name living in the same city. My name is David GORE, and I am a software engineer in Logan, West Virginia. And for the past 2 decades, I've worked for a company that designs fully autonomous unmanned surface vehicles, primarily for the U.S. Navy. So crunching data is something that I do every day of my life. In 2016, prior to the election, and purely for fun, I posted analysis to Facebook with my predictions on how each state would vote, and I surprised myself by accurately calling every state except for Nevada. So this year, I repeated my analysis, and I was determined to predict the outcome in all 50 states. And up until late on election night, I had nailed every single state. But when I woke up the next morning, I was surprised to find that things had drastically changed, primarily in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. So I was curious to see what I had gotten wrong, and so I started looking into the results. Georgia's Secretary of State's website had been posting absentee voting data online, so I downloaded the latest data set. And since I happened to have an earlier set of the absentee voting data that I had downloaded on election day, the very first thing that I did was compare the two sets to see if any of the votes happened to be deleted. I was surprised to find that 597 votes had been deleted. Since the names and the addresses of these voters were listed, I decided to look them up on Facebook. And I discovered an alarming trend. These individuals all shared a common experience on election day. They went to the polls, but they were told they couldn't vote because they had already voted. They were only allowed to vote after they contacted the appropriate people, requested the proper forms, and waited for an hour or longer to sign the paperwork. That's 600 people. Now imagine how many more people were turned away who didn't take the time or have the time to track down someone who could help them jump through all the hoops to invalidate the fraudulent vote that was already cast for them. I then decided to look into duplicate votes, voters with the same registration number. And you would think that that would be impossible, but I happened to find 19 people with the same voter registration number who voted absentee more than once. And then finally, all this talk on social media about dead people voting got me curious. And so, being a software engineer, I wrote some software to scrape recent obituary data in the state of Georgia from publicly available sources. And I then cross-referenced that data with the absentee voting records. And the problem that I ran into with that was there were many instances of people with the same name living in the same city. To verify that the absentee voter was in fact the same person in the obituary, I needed some way of correlating the voter registration number with the date of birth. And thankfully, a gentleman named Mark Davis, who happened to testify the other day before the Georgia Senate, he provided me with a set of data from about 10 years ago that had that information. And just from my limited set of obituary data, I have thus far discovered that there were 2,323 absentee ballots printed for deceased voters, of which 387 were returned, accepted, and counted in this election. I also identified a set of 6,752 absentee ballots that closely matched someone who recently passed away. But these individuals were not yet registered to vote in the older set of data that I was provided by Mr. Davis. So I have no way of verifying these ballots. Again, these findings are from my own small set of obituary data that is very incomplete, and it only goes back just a little over a year. If I can discover all of this from my home 1,000 miles away, then there is absolutely no question that there are thousands upon thousands of more instances that haven't been uncovered. What's impossible for my analysis to uncover is how many absentee ballots were mailed in for people who did not attempt to vote and did not jump through all the hoops required to invalidate a fraudulent vote cast in their name, and therefore will never even know that they voted or for whom they voted. With only 14,000 or so votes, a 14,000 vote margin in Georgia, The citizens of Georgia deserve, at the very least, an independent signature verification of absentee ballots. Otherwise, no one is ever going to trust another election again.
Somebody at 7000 Highlands Parkway. This was approximately 2 o'clock in the morning when I went. All of the websites that were available, it skipped all the 50 or 60 other dumpsters. I haven't been involved with helping Linwood and Sidney Powell, trying to find all the information that we can. One of these days, I can't remember the exact day. It was a Sunday. Linwood tweeted out a video of somebody at 7000 Highlands Parkway, which is Eaton Electrical address, and they showed that it had Secretary of State Wi-Fi available. And he asked us to get up there and check it out. So I went up there. This was approximately 2 o'clock in the morning when I went, about 4 hours after Linwood's tweet, and all of the websites that were available were gone, except for Eaton Visitor. That was the only thing left. So then after that, I went over to the Secretary of State's election warehouse at 210, Suite 210 at 120 Northwoods Parkway. I think that's the address. 120 Northwoods. Not Northwoods. It's in my affidavit. Anyway, I went to the Secretary of State's official elections warehouse and proceeded surveillance there. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, a waste management dump truck came into that complex. It's a big business complex. There's probably 70 or 80 different offices there. The waste management dump truck came in there, went straight to the Secretary of State elections warehouse dumpster, emptied that dumpster, and left. It skipped all the 50 or 60 other dumpsters straight to that one. So that indicated to me that it was a special call pickup. And those two things are the main things that I witnessed personally. Originally, the internet, from Linwood's tweet, and I'll send you that video as well. From Linwood's tweet, it showed that internet Wi-Fi was available for our Georgia Secretary of State, which was in a private business. And Linwood was asking, does Brad Raffensperger have a secret satellite office set up? And so we went over there, and at one point it had Secretary of State web, but after Linwood exposed it, all of that was just wiped out very quickly. So it indicates that they were covering things up, because we know it was there before, and then after it was exposed, it disappeared. I can't say it's 100% specific, but when it comes to one place, it at the very least looks suspicious.
Which day
Yes.
you were there?
There's dates, there's times. I even have timestamps for my Google Maps locations. All of that is within my affidavit.
I also observed that there was 2 internet modems, a blue USB flash drive. The laptop was connected by Wi-Fi. My name is KRISTINA MALIMON. I reside in Portland, Oregon. I'm the Vice Chair of Oregon Young Republicans, a delegate to Multnomah County Republican Party, an ambassador to Turning Point USA and Falkirk Center. I volunteered to come out to Georgia to help with the Senate runoff race. When I learned that there was not enough poll watchers for the Republican Party, I asked if I can be a poll monitor instead. When I arrived in the Annex Board of Elections Chatham County, Savannah, Georgia office, I observed that there was 3 scanning machines, there was 2 adjudicating computers, and a laptop. I also observed that there was 2 internet modems. The internet modems were brightly shining green lights. I also witnessed that there was a blue USB flash drive connected to the front of each scanning computer's hard drive. And this was not a keyboard or a mouse connection. because I witnessed that there was a hardwire connection for the mouse and the keyboard to the back of the computer, of the scanning computer's hard drive. I came closer to check and see how this hardwire connection took place. So there was two internet modems. So the first internet modem had 6 cords. The green Ethernet cord connected from the internet modem to scanning station number 1. The blue Ethernet cord is connected to scanning station number 2. There was also 4 white cords. One of the white cords connected to a black box that was located on the floor. The black box, it looked like it's probably a server. The black box, so it had the internet connection, and it also had connection to a power outlet. A second internet modem was hardwired, connected to scanning station number 3 to the 2 adjudicating computers, and it also had hardwired connection to the black box on the floor. This was a second black box, and it looks like it may be a server. There was also a laptop. The laptop was connected by Wi-Fi. So the laptop was unlocked all day and on all day, and so I passed by and I observed that it was connected by Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi icon was on. This is very concerning to me because the adjudicating computers, the scanning computers, and the laptop were all connected to the internet, and they were using the Dominion software system.
And they had a list. I'm sorry, there's not a John Doe living here. Were false addresses in every case. Hi, my name is Jamie Parrish. I live here in Sandy Springs in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a diehard Republican, Trump fan, former vice chair of the Fulton County GOP, and I've worked on lots of campaigns and whatnot throughout this last campaign cycle. I just wanted to tell you guys and share my story about election fraud in my state, in the state of Georgia here. We all knew that some of the results were coming in. I mean, I had been to the rallies, I'd been to all the things, you know, the Macon rally, the Rome rally, and we knew that the results coming in were not really parallel to the excitement that we had in this state for President Trump, and at the rallies, the yard signs, and just the overall enthusiasm for our state. And so after election night, as you can imagine, a lot of people were just absolutely dumbfounded and wondering, you know, how could this happen? And then the story started breaking of things that were just irregularities in our election. I mean, water pipes breaking, people who were count watchers being sent home at night, and things like that. And I wanted to do my part, and I wanted to be involved in helping prove that this was truly an irregular thing, that this was not just a naturally occurring event, that this was being planned, this was being executed. I partnered with the Trump Victory team, and they had a list of Democratic voters on a spreadsheet. And that list of Democratic voters included names that they thought could or might be fraudulent, registered to vote in my state, but they felt like there was something fishy about them. I personally don't know why these names appeared on this web sheet or spreadsheet, but all I know is that I was given a spreadsheet to go off of, and then I set about researching on my own. I enlisted the help of 2 of my friends, Ms. Kathleen Layton and Ms. Patricia Tinsley, and we started out one morning about 11 a.m. This was on November the 9th, and we had 8 addresses to go to. As we would go to the address, we would turn our cell phones on, and we would film the encounter. and we would knock on the door, and the person would come to the door, and let's just say the guy's name was John Doe.
Hi, how are you? Is Rakela Sumter here?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Does she live here?
No.
She doesn't.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you
Yeah.
for letting us check.
Yeah, we moved in like maybe a few months ago.
Okay, so you've lived here for a few months
Yeah.
then? Okay.
You're so
Do you
sweet.
know if she lived here before, or because we're just trying to find her? Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks so much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, hold on one second. Hi.
I'm not sure if I've got the right place, but is Ryan Ricard here?
No, what address are you looking for?
Well, it's supposed to be 5202.
Oh no.
But I don't, because of 2 is...
Yeah, this is 52.
This is 52, but he doesn't live here?
No.
Do you
Sorry.
know Ryan Ricard anywhere?
How does he look?
I don't know exactly.
I was about to say, 'cause
But it seemed wrong because we also had it listed as Motley address, so I just didn't.
I'm Motley.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're looking for Ryan, but thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Bye.
What can I do for you, ladies?
I'm going to see Keisha Renee Clark in unit 1308.
1308, all right. And what is your name now?
My name is Kathleen Layton.
All right. You sure this is in 1308?
Should be. Who do you have in 13?
It's two, I know who's, but it's two guys that are in that one. Let me see if I can find
So it's not like they moved in last yesterday.
And you know what's funny is they're owners.
Oh, they're the owners of the unit, so they didn't rent it or
So
anything.
it's not 1308.
412. It's Kathleen, Patricia.
Hi, it's Kathleen and Patricia. Hi, I'm here to see Sanja. So nobody lives here by that name? Do you happen to know Sashit? Okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
So it's supposed to be Hudson, which there's not one. Ayana Hudson is in 224, and then Sasha Sanjay Sashdev. So SACH. There's definitely neither Ayana nor Sasha are in this call box for this community, which is 3432 Piedmont Road, and they are not here. And we did verify knocking on doors, spoke with one person. Both are definitely not people on our list.
We would say, hello, may we speak with John Doe? And the person would say, I'm sorry, there's not a John Doe living here, or something along those lines. Then we would say, has he ever lived here? And the person would say, we don't know anybody by the name of John Doe. And then we would follow up with, well, how long have you lived here? And in many cases, it was 6 years, 4 years, whatever. So it was very apparent, the pattern that we saw in our interviews was that there were fraudulent registrations within the Democratic Party, registering addresses that were non-existent to the person that was voting. Now, one thing you will find interesting, and I found this interesting, was that all the addresses that we were validating just so happened to have a gate or a concierge in a lobby or some barrier to keep the general public from getting on property. And that really didn't stop us. We waited for the UPS trucks. We waited for somebody to open the gate, and we would follow through. Maybe, trespassing, I don't know, but it was worth it to me to find out the answer to the question. And the answer to the question, what I found out is that 8 out of 8 addresses given to me with registered Democratic voters in Georgia were false addresses in every case. And I have that documented on video. So if I had 100% fraudulent votes on my list, I can only imagine that many other door knockers doing the exact same thing I was doing had some of the same. As a matter of fact, I've heard from many of them and they had the same. So this means the Democratic Party are registering people to addresses that are not easily proven to be false, meaning behind a gate, behind a concierge. Most people will not risk getting a trespassing charge to validate a vote. I don't mind doing that, but most people won't. And that is what they're counting on, and that is what they're doing. So for the upcoming election, the new senatorial election coming up with Kelly and Doug against Warnock and John Ossoff, I'm afraid we're going to see a lot of the same. I'm afraid we're going to see a lot of dead people voting. I'm afraid we're going to see a lot of out-of-state people moving here to vote. I'm afraid we're going to see the fraudulent address thing. If you have a fraudulent address here in Atlanta, you could probably figure out a way to vote twice in some other position. So I will send you guys in the videos, and I hope that you'll all look at them. Kathleen Layton and Patricia Tinsley did an excellent job for me, asking the right questions when we knocked on the doors. And it just really is disheartening and sad that our democracy has come to this, that a party would lie, cheat, and steal this election from our great president. So I'm Jamie Parrish from Atlanta, Georgia, and I thank you for your time.
It does not meet Georgia laws, which is almost mathematically impossible. That would have settled the whole issue, and she moves the skirted table on, which is also a violation of Georgia law. Then another woman pulls another case out, at least 4. This was an issue with Texas when they rejected the ballots had already been removed from the envelopes and continually streamed false information. My name is Garland Favorito. I am a career IT professional, co-founder of Voter GA, and the elections director for the Constitution Party of Georgia. Voter GA is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, all-volunteer organization. We've been leading the election integrity movement here in Georgia for 16 years. I want to pose the question today that's the most important question to really ask about the 2020 general election in Georgia. And is there compelling evidence of Georgia election fraud? That's the question I think we need to answer. But before we do that, I need to do at least one slide about how we got here. First of all, I wrote to the Secretary of State and system evaluators back in 2002 that the systems that they were being evaluated or under evaluation were unconstitutional because they could not produce verifiable, auditable, and recount-capable results. The Secretary of State ignored us. The General Assembly legalized that kind of voting that cannot be audited, and the Secretary of the Secretary of State purchased the Diebold DRE system. In 2009, the Georgia Supreme Court denied our constitutional claims, and then in 2019, the U.S. District Court banned that system as unconstitutional, and the General Assembly then legalized a new form of system, unverifiable to the voter, that hides votes in barcodes. The Secretary of State then purchased the Dominion Democracy Suite 5.5 system. It's a BMD system, ballot marking device. But the U.S. District Court has already found that it does not meet Georgia law. So with that as the background, here are what my roles were in the 2020 election here in Georgia, the general election. I was the State Farm Arena Observer. I was a Fulton County Tabulation Observer. I was an audit monitor, and I was a recount monitor. In addition to that, Constitution Party of Georgia organized dozens of recount and audit monitors in dozens of counties throughout the state of Georgia. As a Fulton Tabulation Observer, I noticed an abnormal 20,000 vote spike for Joe Biden, while the president's votes appeared to have actually gone down a tad. I submitted an affidavit about that. I notified the elections director, the board of elections at Fulton County, and the county attorney, and I made an open records request for the interim results, but I never received a response. As an audit to monitor, we noticed that there were 3 boxes of 100% Biden ballots, 3 complete boxes, which is almost mathematically impossible. In addition, 4 auditors detected potentially fraudulent absentee ballots. I say that these are potentially fraudulent because they detected that the ballots were not creased from mailing, they were not marked with a writing instrument such as a pen or a pencil, they appeared to have toner copy instead, and there were some differences in ballot stock. I filed an open records request to view those ballots in the custody of the elections director and the division, but my request was ignored. That would have settled the whole issue as to whether or not they were fraudulent or not, and it probably would have settled who won the election as well. But that left me with one burning question: is how could those auditors during the count have found invalid ballots? Well, let me take you to State Farm Arena and let's investigate that question a little bit further. I want to walk you through some election day chronology, but before we do that, I want to just try to give you an idea of the room. The room is a curved room. It's like a semicircle, and you cannot see from one end of the circle to the other. So you come in the door on the left-hand side, and there's an observation area to the left. But you can see part of that room, but you cannot see back in the back right corner. There's just no visibility. The room itself is a violation, I believe, of Georgia law. So let's go through the chronology really quickly. 6:07 a.m. approximately, there was a leaky toilet or urinal that was falsely reported as a water main break. There was no water main break, but the supervisor delayed the starting of mail-in ballot processing for 2 hours. The closest leaky toilet does not abut to the wall where the ballots are being processed, and there does not appear to have been any activity there to move ballots out of the way and that sort of thing in case there was water. But at 8:22 a.m., you'll see a woman in the videos that the president's team presented to the Senate last week. You'll see a woman put a skirted table into this room, and the woman has a blonde braids, and she moves the skirted table on, which is also a violation of Georgia law, I believe. You cannot have skirted tables. We certainly did not have skirted tables in the audit or the recount whatsoever. So that seems to be another violation. At 9:30 a.m., the ballot processing begins. It continues through the day as normal. And about 10 p.m., you'll see the woman in blonde braids again come out and makes an announcement that the processing is going to stop for the night, according to 2 affidavits that are on file. 10:40 p.m., you'll see that the ballot processing stops, but the monitors are still there. And they continue to hang out for a while until they decide that nothing left is going to be done. And they leave along with the Fox 5 reporter who was also there at 10:55. 11:03, the woman with the blonde braids pulls out the first suitcase of absentee ballots out from under the skirted table. Then another woman pulls another case out from under the skirted table, and then the supervisor pulls out another case out from that same skirted table, 11:03, 4, and 5 approximately. 11:10, by that time the scanning of the ballots has been continuing and does continue illegally for almost 2 hours. There appear to be 4 scanners in this picture, and there are at least 4, and then there's those scanners can do at least 3 and if not 5,000 ballots per hour, and that took place for at least 2 hours. So you can do the math on that and see that that could be anywhere from 15 to 25, 30, or even 35,000 ballots. All of that is a direct violation of Georgia law. There can be no dispute about that. You cannot do elections activity without monitors present. About 12:55, the scanners leave after scanning all those ballots onto memory cards. And about 40 minutes later, at 1:35, you'll see this tremendous spike of Joe Biden votes on the election line feed. You'll see that down towards the bottom of this screen, and then you'll also see the times for each upload, that each interim result, and everything looks normal until you get to that one spike that occurred about a half an hour or 40 minutes after these folks had finished scanning what seems to be obviously illegal ballots, and tens of thousands of them. At 1:40 a.m., the monitors returned after they were notified that the counting was still going on. They didn't realize it. And by that time, tens of thousands of votes, 15, 25, maybe even 35,000 votes had been scanned illegally in violation of Georgia law. So that leaves us with a couple of questions that are good questions, I think, that need to be asked. And the first question I think that would come up is, if those ballots are really fraudulent and they were scanned, why does the number of ballots cast match the number of voters voted in Fulton County? Well, the answer is, first of all, it doesn't. It didn't match. There were 340 or plus difference in the number of voters voted versus the number of ballots cast. So other considerations, if they did match, would be the fact that the ballot processing supervisor also controls the ballot tracking list. That's a security issue. If you wanted to make up new ballots, then you could also have the power to check off someone who has already been voted, even if they had not. If you remember, during this election, many people came to the polls and were told that they had already voted by absentee, when in fact they had not. But even another more serious issue is the fact that the Dominion system has a security flaw that allows memory cards to be substituted. This was an issue with Texas when they rejected the Dominion system prior to Georgia purchasing the system. A couple more questions that have come up. Did the monitors decide to leave on their own? That was a theory posed by the Secretary of State's IG in a declaration, which is, by the way, not a sworn affidavit, but a declaration, which has no meaning in a court of law. Well, the video shows that the announcement had ceased, and the monitor's affidavits confirm that. The scanning appears to stop before the monitors had left, and the monitors returned after finding out that the scanning continued. So that tells me those four things actually defeat the Secretary of State's claim and make it false, and those monitors, again, as I mentioned before, have affidavits to back up their contentions, whereas the Secretary of State's office does not. The other question that came up by the Secretary of State is, well, and the contention is that this was normal ballot processing. What you just saw in that video is normal. Well, first of all, it's not normal to have a skirted table to hide ballots under. That is a violation of Georgia law. Again, the ballots were hidden under a table. They were not processed from the wall as the normal ballots were processed. They appear to be in non-standard suitcases versus boxes, which are typically what absentee ballots are in. The ballots had already been removed from the envelopes, and if you noticed in that processing room, that's where they actually open the envelopes. But these ballots had already didn't have any envelopes. The ballots were scanned onto memory cards, as you saw, after the monitors left. That's another violation of Georgia law and not normal. The curvature of the room itself is not normal, and the fact that the monitors were so far roped off from the people who are doing the work. That, again, is not normal. None of this is normal, even though the Secretary of State's manager claims that it is. So without going into a lot of history with the Secretary of State's office, but they have continually streamed false information for the last couple of years, such as these machines would be cheaper than hand-marked paper ballots. We all know, even at that time, that that was true, and the Secretary of State's election director was called out nationally for that. So that's a little I think we've debunked the debunkers here. And let's just sum up with some compelling evidence for our last slide. First of all, the auditors have claimed they handled fraudulent ballots, and they have 4 affidavits to back that up. The monitors were told that processing would stop, but it continued. They have 2 affidavits to back that up. The election line feed shows huge spikes in Biden votes after ballots were processed. There are 2 affidavits to back that up. These are all sworn affidavits made under the penalty of perjury. The simple solution to this problem was for Fulton County to show us the ballots, and then we can decide, are they, in fact, valid ballots or not? And then that way we could resolve the issue. We would know who won. Everybody would have to agree once we looked at the ballots. But instead, Fulton County refuses to do that. You saw the video evidence. If you've seen the president's legal team's video, the ballots appear to obviously be scanned illegally in violation of Georgia law. And in fact, one woman has even confessed to this crime on social media, one of the ones that's featured prominently in the video. She's prayed for forgiveness, and she's told the public she's lowering up according to her Facebook or social media posts. So that leaves me with my nonpartisan perspective as a 16-year nonpartisan 4-voter GA. I did not vote for either one of these presidential candidates. Constitution Party has their own candidate on the ballot. We have had a write-in candidate, Don Blankenship. We were not allowed to put his name on the ballot because of the restrictions in Georgia ballot access law, which are horrendous. But my point is that I have no dog in this hunt. I did not vote for either or 2 candidates, but the evidence is compelling and it's clear. The steal is real, and Georgia electors belong to the President of the United States.
I heard the auditor talking to the other auditor, and she said, and I quote, "I'm paid by the taxpayer, and this effing a-hole wants to come in here and watch me." That several of the tables, they had an 8 to 10 inch stack of purely Biden votes. One, an example, had not a single solitary Trump vote. Hi, I'm HALE SOUCIE. I'm a resident of Cobb County, Georgia, and I serve as a volunteer recount monitor during the recount process in Cobb County as well as in Fulton County. From the get-go, I was there on the first day when the recount started in Cobb. One of the first things that I noticed was the increasingly hostile tendencies of the auditors, the table managers, and people at the entire Jim R. Miller facility while we were doing the recount process. At one point from 209 to 212, I observed a table, the first person at the table, the auditor who was supposed to call out the vote initially, the other person is then supposed to confirm it. Well, that first person 3 times in 3 minutes from 209 to 212 on, I think it was the 14th, she called 3 Trump votes for Biden. So that's 3 votes that should have been for President Trump went to President Biden. Now, in this instance, the second checker was able to catch those, but I left that table quickly because I observed that other tables, the second checker was not confirming what the initial person had called out. They were simply taking the votes and putting them into the bin. When I went to talk to the election officials to inform them what I had seen, they said that they would go and talk to the table in question, which was table 17. After they did, I was walking around the room again. I noticed that she was also, again, not confirming or second checking what the first auditor was calling out. As I walked over to her table, she saw that I was standing there, and she began to, in a very exaggerated manner, raise the ballots to her face in a mocking sort of tone. But I was satisfied with this because I wanted her to be second checking. So as I continued to walk away, I turned around and saw that she was staring me down as she's being handed more ballots. And as I continued around the room, I saw more and more auditors were becoming aware of me, table managers were becoming aware of me as well, and they were pointing me out where I was in different parts of the room. So as I came back around to that first table in question, I heard the auditor talking to the other auditor, and she said, and I quote, "I'm paid by the taxpayer, and this effing a-hole wants to come in here and watch me." So last I checked, I'm a taxpayer. I'm lawfully allowed to be there, and they should have people in there to audit this process and confirm that this is being done above board. From here, Cobb County, I also noticed on the second day that they were not using the electronic counting machines that they've been using on the first day. When asked about this, they gave us no answer for why that happened. The next day I decided to go down to Fulton County because we had a lot of people show up for Cobb that would be checking there. And I actually have, still in my possession, I've held on to this. This is the letter that's supposed to permit me to go onto the floor in Fulton County. This is what's allowing me to get close to the ballots. And I still have this because no one ever checked this letter. No one ever took this from me. I'm supposed to surrender it when I get to the recount facility. As I walked in, it was the basement of the World Congress Center. There was an unattended clipboard with some hand sanitizer, and no one was there checking. No one confirmed who I was, and I was able to walk directly onto the floor and be within arm's reach of ballots. And to show why this is so disturbing that no one was ever checking who I was, within a few, I would say less than a minute of me being there, they have runners who bring the suitcases of ballots to the tables for the auditors to count. One of these runners came up to me. He said, "I was supposed to take this suitcase to table 96, but they already have a suitcase there." He rolled the suitcase towards me and said, "Can you take it for me?" So the figures that we've been hearing are anywhere between 6,000 and 15,000 ballots, and correct me if I'm wrong, ballots are in these suitcases that they're supposed to be preserving the chain of custody on it. He offered this to me. There's no security. I could have walked out of there if I had no scruples or didn't follow the rule like some of the other people that I observed. I could have walked out with the difference of the election. As I continued around the room, no one was checking who I was, and because our name tags were similar to the election officials, I was constantly asked by auditors what they should do with ballots, what they were supposed to do. Could I get them more ballots? Could I answer a question? Now, I'm just supposed to be here as a recount monitor. All of these things, I just want to stress this again because it was brought up in the state legislative meeting that, oh, these people are not under oath. I've sworn to this in a notarized affidavit. I've signed this under penalty of perjury, and I've testified about this, and I will continue to testify about this under oath. I'm more than willing to put my hand on the Bible and testify to these things. Some of the other things very quickly, we saw some tables, they had 2 suitcases of ballots there. No reason for that. The auditing tags that are supposed to keep the chain of custody on the suitcases that say when they've been open, most of these were not filled out and some of them were even broken. As I was able to walk up to the suitcase at the front of the room where they're storing, there's a back haul, no one's checking that. I was able to get within arm's reach, and I have pictures of all of these. So, like I said, I'll swear to this under oath, and I can also show pictures, and I intend to show these pictures. One of the other disturbing things that I noticed is that several of the tables, they had an 8 to 10 inch stack of purely Biden votes. One, an example, had not a single solitary Trump vote. So I work with consumer data, and anytime we have a number that's approaching the 90th percentile, you start to get very wary about that because that's just the probability of that happening. So for this entire stack of ballots, anywhere between, it's 8 and 10 inches tall, I'll let you do the math on this, several thousand ballots, to not have a single solitary person vote for Trump, it just doesn't add up, and it's very disturbing. There was plenty of other things there. There's honestly too much to mention in my affidavit. I'm willing to make available to anybody, but the reality is that people are losing faith in this election. I went to restore my faith and to see that this was all being done above board. I was not going out there with a vendetta or to try to catch them. I honestly expected not to see anything, and I stumbled right into all of this stuff. And it's going to continue on January 5th. So I think that this is a very serious issue that needs to be addressed because this ballots and this disdain for the ballots that these people had. Side note, I saw one person roll up a ballot and swat a fly with it. That's how much they care about your vote. And I think that's very important that this needs to be addressed.
These ballots were identical, one after the other. I brought it to the attention of the supervisor at the table, and I said, "This is very strange. These all look the same." Hi, my name is CAROLYN Garcia. I'm a 40-year resident of Georgia. I've been involved with politics and policy since 1972. I've been a poll watcher for more than 20 years in the state of Georgia, and in 2016 through the 2020 election, I was a poll worker, and this year was listed as a backup poll manager. I'm going to quickly move forward to after the election when I was put on a list for the voter review panel. Originally, they had messed it up and put me as a backup person, and so I didn't expect to be called. However, one evening, from leaving from another appointment, I got a call from a lady saying that the person delegated to go that night to be on the voter review panel could not come. Could I please be there? So it just so happened that I was able to be there at the Jim Miller Park where this was taking place. The people were cordial when I arrived, but there were a lot of people milling around within the area, holding ballots in their hands, talking to other people. In the back, there were a lot of people that I found that were just poll watchers that really could not see anything from the distance that they were placed behind a barrier. I sat down with the attending supervisor for the table they assigned me to, and myself and a Democrat were to look at ballots. These ballots were called, there were two ballots. One was called a defective ballot and had that listed on the ballot itself. The other was a backup, it was a duplicate ballot. And things went along fine, except I began to notice a pattern. And about 4 to 6 ballots in a row, and I'll stop here and say that I could not take notes because I had my purse out of the way. I could not use my phone because they didn't want me using my phone to take a picture. So I began to notice on these these defective ballots that there was a pattern. And as I said, 4 to 6 of those in a row had the same thing on them. I began to also look at the ballot paper itself and notice that it looked different from the things that was folded. These were pristine ballots, no folds, no creases. The 4 to 6 ballots that I observed had an X through the circle of where Donald Trump's name was. And around that X in the circle was another circle. And below that, Joe Biden's name was filled in completely in the circle. Below that was the names in the write-in area of Joe Biden, and under that, Kamala Harris. These ballots were identical, one after the other. I brought it to the attention of the supervisor at the table, and I said, "This is very strange. These all look the same." And her words to me were, "Well, you know, sometimes we have new voters, and it's probably a bunch of people that got together and designated one person to fill out their ballot." I said, "First of all, this is illegal. Second, why would they make the same mistake on all of these ballots in a row, where at the X and the circle at Donald Trump's name, and then it is written in Joe Biden, Kamala Harris in the write-in?" And from what I remember seeing, the ink was the same and the printing looked identical. And then she mentioned that, well, you know, sometimes a grandchild or another adult will help a person who's having trouble with seeing. I said, that is still illegal. So she kind of just gave me a look, and we went on from there. And then I began to look more closely after that incident, and I noticed that much of this paper looked too white, too pristine, too printed out, basically, and I'm not accusing someone of doing that, but just from the looks of the paper, that's what I observed. There were very few Donald Trump ballots, but yet all of these defective ballots in most cases had it to where we, the Democrats sitting there and myself, had to make the determination of who we perceived the voter had voted for. And I mentioned to the lady, we're not mind readers. These should be put aside because they're defective ballots, and I don't know how you can actually count them as a ballot. I was called back 2 other times for the voter review panel. I didn't really observe the same situations there. We had far less ballots to look at that point. And then I was called the last day of the voter review panel, and we just had 2 or 3. Something else that just kind of struck and stood out to me was the familiarity and the friendliness of the supervisors to many of the people that were from the Democrat side. Now, they might have been friends previously, that can happen. I'm just very concerned. I almost didn't come forward with this, but then I realized, you know, if I see something that just doesn't look right, and there are very glaring, blatant issues that I saw myself, then I need to bring this forward and let others know about it. I thank you for your time and appreciation of looking at what I'm having to say, and I just hope that we, in the future, have fair and balanced and legal elections. Thank you.
Their final table count had only 226 votes for Trump and 3,087 for Biden. We were told we could not speak to any of them. We could not take pictures on the floor. We could not talk to anybody but an election official, who then had to go to the table to tell them our complaint. Hello, my name is Lisa Kaminsky, and I am from Fulton County, and I was a witness, actually a monitor, at the Fulton County recount on November 14th and 15th. What I'd like to state today is what I had submitted via an affidavit to Senator Ligon, and it is my written statement that was submitted to him. To begin with, although that I am a Republican, I came in with the Constitution Party of Georgia to be a monitor for the audit. The group was originally given permission to be monitors, so I was told. Per Richard Barron, I believe he was the director of elections, the group was not allowed to be on the counting floor and stated that only parties of the candidates were allowed to have 10 members each maximum on the floor for monitoring. I was able to be accepted by the Georgia GOP party to observe and be a monitor, given a credentialing letter. But again, the group was only allowed 10 members on the floor, of which there were only 5 or 6 of us there on the morning of the 14th. I was trying initially to observe well over 30 tables, probably 36 and more initially. It was a scramble to try and find additional people. We had a young man by the name of Matthew Honeycutt, who said he was from the Georgia GOP, that was there trying to get other people as well, and he was the only person, and he was our contact who was able to get me the credentialing letter. So in the morning, the mail-in ballots were being counted, of which I witnessed and recorded 28 boxes with questionable low ballot percentages of votes for Trump, and of those, 14 boxes contained groups or subsections, and what I learned what those were the batch numbers, because I have never been involved in politics to this degree before, other than getting out and voting. So if my terminology is incorrect, I apologize. But the groups and the subsections of the percentage of the Trump ballots to Biden were very suspiciously low, meaning that I saw only 1 to 5 ballots for Trump for every 100 to 150 votes for Biden. In one case, I saw approximately 50 ballots noted for Trump to over 350 for Biden, noted on a tally sheet for 1 lot out of a box. I witnessed 1 box of ballots left opened and unattended, and another where there was a question of a range of numbers on the box, and an election official changed the number on the outside of the label of the box. And I don't know if this is pertinent or not, but the batch numbers on a box were changed. There were counters who kept their yellow tally sheets turned face down and boxes on the floor with the label either turned in toward their leg or facing under the table, so that we as the monitors could not see the lot numbers, the batch numbers. I even had one auditor who physically went to stand between myself and the table to block me from looking at anything. I witnessed a few very large piles of votes for Biden, approximately 1,000, and just a handful of votes for Trump within a suitcase. Around 3:30, an announcement was made that if a table did not have a suitcase of ballots in front of them, then those auditors could go home. After that, I felt that the remaining auditors had picked up speed, and I question if errors may have been made in their haste to finish counting their suitcase. I felt like once a majority of people started leaving, that there was a rush to get things done. I took notes to the best of my ability of the polling place that the suitcase came from and the table with which it was being counted. All suitcases left on the table were to be sealed with a plastic lock, but I did notice and report 2 suitcases on one table where one was locked and the other was not, and they were left unattended. So the next day when we came in, we were limited to, again, 1 monitor per 17 tables. And we were told that we could not hover and we had to keep moving, which makes it very difficult to actually, since you can't read the writing, you have to be able to take your time to look at something. I now also had to put my name badge on, and I had my name badge, but then I also had to label myself as with the GOP party. So I do not recall any of the counters at the tables wearing any name badges, let alone marked with which party that they were affiliated. So why were we as GOP members told that we had to wear a badge notating which party we were with? Every time that the official walked away, went back to doing things the way that they wanted and tried to, again, confront me. We were told we could not speak to any of them. We could not take pictures on the floor. We could not talk to anybody but an election official, who then had to go to the table to tell them our complaint. The small writing on the paper ballots, again, made it difficult to read and locate the candidate's name. Many tables turned their ballots upside down so that we could not verify that each ballot was going into the pile for that candidate. They also had their tally sheets turned over so that we could not read them, even though that they were told by the election official, Ms. Mabel Jones-Allen, to make sure that we were able to see the sheets and the suitcase labels clearly. I noted what looked like different thicknesses of paper used for electronic voting from what I had at my voting place. Some seemed like regular copy paper, while what I had seemed and voted on and had received when I voted was a thicker cardstock. And I'm only saying this because when I saw them counting it, it had a different airiness, loftiness to the paper than a heavier cardstock that I had used for my own vote. Their final table count had only 226 votes for Trump and 3,087 for Biden, 27 for Jorgensen, 9 for a no vote, and a total of 33,349 votes. But the case was labeled as 3,377 votes. I do recognize that there are differences in manual count and what may be on there. However, I question the percentage of votes that were in that suitcase. I witnessed and noted 5 other tables where the count seemed extremely skewed in votes. For example, 504 votes for Trump to 3,762 votes for Biden at table 113 from Ponce de Leon Library, 75 votes for Trump to 3,211 votes for Biden at table 737 for Wolf Creek Library number 3, a less than 25% stack for Trump versus a 75+ stack for Biden, table 10 from, again, Ponce de Leon Library, a 1/4 inch stack for Trump versus and well over 12-inch stack for Biden at table 40 for C.T. Martin, and it was an unfinished bag 2 of 2. 14 votes for Trump and 109 votes for Biden at table 109. The recount of the mail-in ballots, I saw ballots that looked to be perfectly filled in with even coloring within the bubble, all in black, and I question how these ballots were filled in.
His explanation for counters leaving their post mid-count was that people are human and people have to eat and go to the bathroom, were the very ones attacking me for raising questions of concerns when the proper protocols were not being followed. My name is Caroline Jeffords, and I am a lifelong resident of Georgia and currently living in Fulton County. I was credentialed to serve as a GOP monitor for the Georgia vote recount held at the Georgia World Congress Center on November 14th of this year. Prior to arriving, I viewed an instructional video and read over the proper protocols and procedures that I was to follow as a monitor and what I was to look out for. I arrived at approximately 12:45 for my 1 to 5 p.m. shift. And note, there was no sign-in, and I was able to walk in and do anything I wanted. I still to this day did not sign in. No one questioned me. I immediately witnessed and observed several deviations from the procedures and protocols that were outlined to be followed in the ballot counting process at several of the tables. It was apparent that there was no consistent or uniform workflow process being followed by the counters who are doing the procedures in several various ways. Counters were also eating, drinking, and their personal belongings were all on the counting tables, all while they were supposed to be counting. There was also at least one table, table 123, where a man in a white outfit was counting all alone, unsupervised, and unverified. I have video evidence as well as pictures of this man. And again, this was as soon as I walked in the room, I witnessed this. Ballots were also being stored in multiple black carry-on suitcases and pallets against the back wall of the room in the Georgia World Congress Center, in an area that appeared to be unsupervised and unsecure. I also have video evidence and photos of this area as well. There were numerous instances of the counters not following the proper process, and including counters leaving the table in the middle of counting and tallies not being tabulated. I recorded the table numbers as well as the vote totals and tallies, and will provide those and can provide those in details to you later. I also have photographic evidence of these tables. At approximately 2:57 p.m., almost 2 hours into my arrival, after witnessing concerning activity at table 124 and even more blatant disregard to the protocol and process, I raised my hand and asked to speak with and asked for an election recount supervisor to come over to the table to report my concerns, which is what I was instructed to do so. It took several minutes for anyone to arrive. I found myself asking a familiar face, grabbing her arm and asking her to please find me a supervisor as I continued to stay at the table and watch. The first person to arrive was whom at the time did not introduce himself. I was unsure of who he was, but later found out that he was indeed the Fulton County Board of Elections director. Shortly following his arrival was she was an election supervisor. And then shortly thereafter, approximately 6 to 7 other Democratic monitors began to arrive and kind of gather around me. And then I saw who is appointed by the state elections board as the state monitor. I saw him and asked him to come over as well because I was not feeling comfortable at this time. Also, a Miss Cheryl Ringer arrived kind of late into this conversation towards the latter half, and she had come over from table 122 where she had been sitting at the table by herself while 2 other people had left to go eat. And she was not a recount. She was not someone who was certified to count votes, but there she was sitting at the table. The conversation with Mr. quickly became very confrontational as he seemed very defensive and irritated that I was bringing these violations to his attention. He began speaking to me in a quite aggressive and condescending manner, very disrespectful, very confrontational, very rude. It was obvious that he was not concerned about any breach of protocol and did not even dispute what I had witnessed was a violation of the rules. Instead, his explanation for counters leaving their post mid-count was that people are human and people have to eat and go to the bathroom, and then proceeded to question my humanity towards others. Obviously, I countered back with, well, everyone else is eating and drinking at their tables, and there's no reason why these people have to get up and leave. As I was surrounded by other workers and officials, I mentioned the atmosphere became somewhat threatening. I consider myself to be a strong woman. I was raised by parents who taught me that I could do anything or be anything, and the sky was the limit. I found myself in a position trying to hold back tears and hold my ground for what Mr. Barron and Mr. Jones were doing to me, as well as the other monitors that gathered around, how they were making me feel. I saw and asked Carter Jones to come over and help, and then I explained what took place. He looked over at Mr. Rick Barron, and Mr. Barron recited the same excuses he had said to me earlier, and then Carter Jones continued to repeat the same excuses Mr. Barron had stated earlier to me. I also asked that my complaint be documented since they told me that they weren't going to do anything about it, and I was told that there was no way in which to do so. I was in total shock and disbelief realizing that the very people charged with ensuring and protecting this process of our right to vote, were the very ones attacking me for raising questions of concerns when the proper protocols were not being followed. Later on, at approximately 4:45, suitcases were people had left. Suitcases were unattended on tables. Stacks of ballots were still left on tables. Nobody was around. So if, another monitor had been sitting, watching a table for 10 minutes. And I said, what's going on? He said, nobody's been here. I went and tracked down the election board monitor. And I said, come over here. There's a whole table full of ballots, unlocked, not in a suitcase. And he goes, oh, I see that's Miss Mabel. She's headed over there. It's okay. This is the end of the day. Anything could happen. How is this allowed to how is this okay for him? Also, approximately on November 20th, I called the Fulton County Elections Office to verify that they had indeed documented my voting. I did vote in person early the last day, and I was shocked to find out that they told me that I had requested an absentee ballot. They could not tell me the date it was mailed. They said that they don't have that information in their system. So then I thought, well, can you look at my husband, and asked if he too was mailed an absentee ballot? And sure enough, he as well was mailed an absentee ballot. Neither of us received an absentee ballot in the mail. And they proceeded to tell me that when we arrived to vote, that we should have had to present our IDs and also sign a form to acknowledge that we were signing over or kind of giving up our right of our absentee ballot. None of that took place for myself or my husband. And then lastly, I also filed an incident, a report with the Georgia Secretary of State's office through their website. So I have a copy of that. I did receive a call back from an investigator, Frances Watson, who proceeded to hardly ask me any questions. I continued to try to give her more details, multiple details, and she was uninterested. When I had called to the GOP hotline and spoke with a volunteer, they asked more questions than she did. And she is supposed to be the lead investigator for the Georgia Secretary of State's office. I'm standing up. I'm anxious. I'm standing up for myself. I'm anxious about it. I'm nervous about it. But at the same time, I'm doing something about it. I'm here. So today, I am asking my representatives, my elected officials and representatives to stand up for me. Stand up for me, stand up for my neighbors, stand up for us as Georgians. All we're asking for is to please know what happened and know the truth. People are not following the protocols and rules that they themselves have set into place, and we as citizens just want to know what has taken place.
I went to register in March, and when I did, I found out that I had actually been registered in January of 2018. She approached me and tried to take my ballot from me. I went to review the picture of my ballot, and I noticed at the bottom where a page number was listed, it said 1 out of 2. Hello. My name is Stefan Bisley. I am a lifelong Georgia resident. I currently reside in Clayton County, and I just want to talk about a few irregularities that I've experienced this election cycle. This was my first year voting. I've never been registered before, and my first issue came with trying to register. I went to register in March, and when I did, I found out that I had actually been registered in January of 2018. I contacted the Secretary of State's office to find out when and how this had happened. I did not receive a reply. My mother, who is a German immigrant, she is a legal resident, but she is a non-voting citizen. She's not eligible to vote. She received a postcard in the mail urging her to register to vote before the general election. After the general election, she received 2 notices from an out-of-state NGO with a registration form that was partially filled in with her information already. And then a week after that, she received another postcard urging her to register to vote. On election day, I went to vote in person. After making my selections on the machine, it printed out my ballot. Being that it was my first time voting, I took a picture of my ballot. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to, but I have the picture. When I walked over to the scanner to have it inserted and counted, the poll worker, I'm assuming it was a poll worker, she approached me and tried to take my ballot from me. I took my ballot, towards my body, and I asked her, do I put it in face up for it to be scanned? She kind of gave me a dirty look and said yes. I put it in. She was standing right here next to me while it was happening, reading my ballot as it was going into the machine. After the machine said that it was accepted, green light came on. She handed me my sticker. I told her, have a good day. She told me, you too, and then I left. About a week later, I went to review the picture of my ballot, and I noticed at the bottom where a page number was listed, it said 1 out of 2. I'm not sure what it's for. I'm not saying that it's malicious. However, when I contacted the Secretary of State's office, I got no reply. When I contacted the Clayton County office, I got no reply. I have seen another ballot from Fulton County, and at the bottom, the page number says 1 out of 1. I would just like an answer as to what that stands for. And the last thing I would like to say is I find it unacceptable for the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to tell us that human error caused all of these issues that we're seeing when he assured us that spending over $100 million on machines would eliminate human error. And I find it ironic that with the large increase in mail-in ballots and a substantial decrease in rejected ballots, that the forms that were actually filled in by human beings were more accepted and had less problems than the ones that were done by the machines.
It was impossible to clearly monitor. There were approximately 40 table stations and only 4 monitors. My name is Concetta S. Johnson. I am a retired paralegal, and I am a registered voter in Cobb County, Georgia. I was designated as an audit monitor to report to the Cobb County, Georgia recount location at the Jim R. Miller Event Center in Marietta, Georgia. Only 4 Republican and 4 Democrat monitors were allowed on the floor at any one time. It was impossible to clearly monitor all of the table stations while on the floor, since there were approximately 40 table stations and only 4 monitors. As one of the 4 Republican monitors on the floor, I witnessed many counters not calling out the names for the vote for president, nor were they counting out loud. I noticed that many of the counters were doing their own type of style or format and certainly not following the instructions that they were given and that I had heard earlier. As a monitor, it was also extremely difficult, if not impossible, to see the presidential choice marked on the paper machine receipt ballots containing the scan code in the upper left-hand corner. I also wondered whether the scan code correctly recorded the vote choices of the voter shown on the paper machine receipt ballots, and there's no way to know if that was the case. I came off the floor and went to the designated area for observers behind the caution tape. I happened to look up and saw the counters at the table directly in front of me putting ballots in the tray marked for Trump and then moving them into the Biden tray. I started to video the counters as they continued to do the same thing. The counters are putting the ballots from the Trump tray, then removing them and putting them into the Biden tray. Then the counters are taking ballots from the no vote tray and moving them into the Jorgensen tray. And then from the Jorgensen tray, moving them into the Biden tray. Then all the ballots in the Biden tray were gathered and put on the table, the other table where the ballot count sheet was filled out. I called the fraud line and told them what I had witnessed, and I was asked to send the video to them. As a monitor and an observer, I became convinced that the entire process was sloppy and unorganized and demonstrated suspicious and fraudulent behavior. In summary, I observed behavior that appeared to me to be completely inconsistent with the fair and accurate counting of ballots at the tables I was observing. My sworn affidavit and the video I filmed confirm my observations of the fraudulent behavior I witnessed. And thank you for having this hearing.
We don't know that the signatures match the database. One, there's human error. There was laziness or intentional negligence. I'm Catherine Flom, Cobb County resident. I worked as a monitor for Cobb County for the hand recount and the machine recount. I am speaking today to attest that there is no way, after all the monitoring that I did, I could state that this recount, both recounts, proved that the election was fair from what I witnessed. First and foremost, we were merely recounting paper ballots. We had zero way to prove whether the ballots were verified. We don't know if the person had a legitimate ID, lived in the precinct they were voting, were alive, had moved out of the state. We don't know if the ballot was cast on time. We don't know if the Dominion voting machine actually altered the piece of paper once it was cast in person and then fed into the machine. We don't know that the signatures match the database. How do we know that these people haven't already voted and that you know, all the other methods that they live in that precinct? And she said, oh, our computers catch all of that. And this is the same Dominion voting system that we're having so much, there's so much evidence of fraud on. So when I mentioned that to her, I said, this is the same, you know, questioned computer system. She said, that's just a rumor. That's not true. So then I proceeded to work for many days. I worked many days through the hand recount, and then I continued to work through the machine recount. There are a number of incidents I witnessed that lead to my saying that I can't prove that this was, or state that this was a fair way to prove our election was fair. So two people would be sitting right across from each other. People would be sitting one end from the other. And then they were allowed to line up the ballot boxes however they wanted. So Joe Biden could be at one end of a 5 or 6 foot long table. Trump could be at the other end. Joe Jorgensen could be in the middle. Or it could be different on the next table we went to. So as a monitor, being required to stand 6 feet apart, we were 4 people per, 4 Republicans allowed per 10, for all of the tables, so that was 40 tables, so 1 person per 10 tables, which is already impossible to monitor. And then you approached, every table you approached had a different configuration. So we had to, and the type for seeing which president was on that little ballot was very small. So we had to get our eyes readjusted to every table we approached. Biden might be on one side of the table, Trump might be on the other, and we couldn't physically run back and forth to see what they were sorting and to make sure that they were there. So that's one example of how the table arrangement, the person arrangement, made it impossible for me to even say if they got them in the right spot. The hand recount, there were a pair of people. They were supposed to serve as 2 sets of eyes. To read it, and then the next person would read it. So one person would read Trump. The next person would look at it and see Trump or Biden, and then they would put it in the sorting bin. And you could tell when they were doing it correctly by watching their eyes. So at one table on Saturday morning, Friday had gone fairly, I hadn't seen this error on Friday. Saturday morning show up, there are some workers there who didn't understand the instructions. And I could see by their eyes that the first person was calling, you know, whoever it was for, and they were taking it and putting it in the bin. They were not checking it. They were not the double set of eyes. So when I pointed this out, I'm not allowed to talk to the workers. I couldn't stop motion. So I had to run across the room, get Janine or Allison, bring them back while they're continuing to do this erroneous method and say, they're not double checking. And Allison was like, no, I'm sure they are. And so I said, well, watch. And so she stopped and talked to the workers, and sure enough, she did not know she was supposed to be double checking. Allison had to go around to the other tables and make sure that the teams actually understood your 2 sets of eyes. That was one example. This was the second full day into a recount, so who knows whether people were doing it correctly. Another example during the machine recount, when this error happened and you had a, they had hit submit on the machine, on the Dominion voting machine, that entered the wrong amount. It entered 48, even though it should have been 47, or vice versa. At that point, Allison had to call the Dominion voting system technician over to that computer, and that's when I realized that the Dominion voting system technician can remove a batch at will. So he was able to remove that batch completely, just negated it on the computer, and then they rescanned it and put the proper one in. So there were so many things wrong with this whole incident. One, there's human error. There was laziness or intentional negligence. And then I was witness to the fact that a Dominion computer person can alter whatever he wants. He can remove a submitted batch when he wants. My thought is that after working maybe up to 5 days or 8 days or whatever on these recounts, I cannot state at all that this indicates that this was a fair election and that the recounts prove it.
There was 1 foot 2 feet high of Biden votes, and there'd be 0 Trump stacks. The ballots looked perfect, pristine. The paper was flat, didn't look like they'd been folded. The mark on it was perfectly in the dot. It did not look like a human did it. I was a observer at Fulton County at the Georgia World Congress Center. And I was there the morning when they counted the absentee and the mail-in votes. And I noticed as I walked around, and I had to monitor 20 to 30 tables because we didn't have very many people there. And we had to stay, 6 feet away, and we were constantly having announcements made where we were hovering over the tables to stand away. And it was it felt pretty hostile.
And she told me that she thought my ballot was upstairs to be processed in. And she took my phone number and she said, as soon as we get it in, we'll call and let you know. Well, at around 3:30 that afternoon, I hadn't heard from anyone. So I called the Secretary of State's office again. They told me the same thing. You don't have a vote. You need to get to your elections office. There's a 5 o'clock deadline and see what's going on. So I immediately drove to Rome's election office, and I went in, presented my ID. She took it to a computer, looked me up, and came back. And she looked at me and she said, I believe your ballot is upstairs to be keyed in. And now this is a little after 4 p.m. on Friday, November the 6th. And I said, ma'am, I voted in person on October 13th. Why is my ballot not in the system yet? And she asked me, did you sign a white piece of paper when you voted? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, you're good to go. We'll get you in before 5. Well, that night, my vote still wasn't in my account. I messaged Brad Raffensperger through Facebook, and he responded Sunday that I also told him that there were 8 others in my community that I knew of that did not have their votes in their accounts. 2 people had their entire voter registration account deleted, and I asked him to please do some research at Rome's election office, send somebody up, something's going on. And his response was, don't worry, you voted the same way as I did, your vote counted. He didn't look me up, he didn't ask for relevant information, he just told me, it's fine, everything's fine. And so Monday, November the 9th, I called the Secretary of State's office again, and they said, ma'am, you don't have a vote in the general election, you need to call your local elections office to see what went wrong. So I immediately called Rome's.
A means accepted, and some other letters that I will explain in the next slide as well that are very important in my data analysis. This also gives congressional district, combo, vote center ID for the early vote mainly,